Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Your Next Business Bestie. And this week, I am excited to introduce you to my new friend, Magali. Hi, Magali.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so Magali is another guest that this is our first time talking. We connected through Recess, and a couple weeks ago, Diana's episode was live on the podcast. But Recess is just such an amazing hub for creative entrepreneurs. And Magali, why don't you tell everybody what it is that you do?
I'd love to. Thanks, Jen. So I'm Magali and I'm a vitality coach. So I help women unlock their vitality through really a mind, body, and soul or holistic approach. So my passion in life is to help any woman who's in any kind of transition, whether that be in a transition from a career perspective, from a relationship perspective, from a body perspective, to just help them feel the best that they can. And by trade, in terms of like training, I'm a Reiki master, also a yoga teacher, and a holistic health coach. And then before that, I did a startup business for 6 years. So, yeah, that's a little bit about what I do.
Beautiful. Yeah. So my friend Angie was on the podcast. It'll be a couple months before your episode at this point, but she coaches coaches. And we had this whole discussion about all the people coming into the coaching world and how that business is expected to just continue to boom, the coaching industry as a whole. But when I read that you were a vitality coach, I just think that's such a cool niche to have. It's such a different approach. We were just talking briefly before I started recording, but you talked about the three aspects, the mind, body, and soul. So why don't you talk a little bit about what those three different pieces mean to you, what they look like for your clients, all the things.
Yeah, for sure. So, I think I've always been somebody that's been very holistic and curious into this world. But in my startup world, I was very much in my masculine and not at all, and just in the doing. And I started seeing a Reiki healer and all of these things, and I started understanding that there is this like whole world of being and that we don't need to be doing all the time. And so I started understanding the like balance between the feminine and masculine. And so the mind, body, and soul approach really is for me. So the mind, thinking about our inner critic, our the power of the mind, right? We have such power in our thoughts. And just I think they say that 90% of our thoughts are repetitive. So thinking about if you have something like 70,000 thoughts a day, 90% of those are the same. And we actually have the power to be like, those can be really positive and helpful and create a better future, or they can really keep us stuck in the past and in negative emotions. So I love to dive into the work of the mind with myself and clients. The body, I think any person who's had a relationship with food and their body has had ups and downs, and there are so much complexities with the media and what you're supposed to look like and exercise you're supposed to do. And I really wanted to, I saw myself outsourcing my health and outsourcing advice in terms of my body. And so the work that we do there is all about connecting back to our intuition and obviously learning from experts, because things like balancing your blood sugar is extremely
Yeah.
helpful, and being able to listen to your intuition. And then the last one, which is soul, honestly ends up being a lot of business coaching, because a lot of the beautiful women that I coach have some sort of idea or like passion or something that they want to bring to life. It doesn't have to be a full fledged business, but it's just helping them with the work of the mind and the body, because they're all linked, connect to how we can bring that to life.
Beautiful. And I read in your form that you filled out, you have lived all over the world, like some very
Yeah.
cool places. So, can you share with our audience the places that you have lived and experienced?
Yeah, I think it's a big part of who I am. So originally I'm French, even though people are always like, you don't sound like it. But I'll get into why in the journey. But I was born in Singapore, lived there until not even one, and then we moved to Bangkok, Thailand, where I was there until I was around 6-ish. Then we moved to Brussels in Belgium. Um,
That's one of
and then
my favorite places, by the way, Belgium.
oh
I
yeah,
spent one day there when I studied abroad in Paris, and I took a bus tour to Bruges, and
oh I
I
love,
felt like I had stepped into a fairy tale. It was
yeah.
beautiful, but keep
It's
going.
beautiful. Belgium doesn't get enough credit. As a
Yeah.
French person, people would be like, "How can you say that?" There is funny rivalry between us,
Oh, that's
um,
funny.
but it's a beautiful place. And so all up until then, even though we were in different countries, I was in the French school system. We moved around because of my dad's job, and then we moved to Kalamazoo, Michigan. So from like, these huge big cities into kind of what felt like at that time for me, the middle of nowhere, especially because I was, I went from like all these French schools and being with international kids my whole life to being the only international person. And I spoke zero English. So I was around 12. So think about what a 12-year-old girl goes through and getting to a school. And I had like on a little piece of paper, my mom had written like, "Can I please go to the bathroom?" But she had written, "Can I please go to the toilet?" Because her English was also not the best. And then
Mhm.
I like read it out loud once, and the kids were like all laughing at me. So it was like definitely a big part of my journey.
Culture
But
shock
also,
for sure.
oh yeah, huge culture shock. But I often say that if I had stayed in the French system, I don't think I would have become an entrepreneur. So I'm extremely
Okay.
grateful for that experience. And then just before my senior year of high school, my parents were like, "We're moving to Seoul, South Korea." So I did my senior year of high school there, which was a beautiful experience. I'm so grateful for it. And then I decided to start my college life in the UK. I wanted to keep my education in English, but I needed to come back to France. Like I wanted to be closer. A lot of my family was living there at the time. It was really important for me. And then I worked in London until I decided to change my career into social entrepreneurship. And so that led me to San Francisco. And I've been here, it'll be 10 years next August, which is the longest place I've lived anywhere.
That's crazy. I've never been to San Francisco. It is high on my list. I've been to Southern California, um, but I have not made it to Northern California yet. But that's very cool that you're in your longest chapter when it comes to location. And you hinted at it earlier, but I know a big part of your story is the 6 years that you spent in the tech startup. So what did you end up going to school for? How did you end up with this tech startup? And what was that chapter like?
Yeah. So I went to school I did a master's in social entrepreneurship. While I was in college, I always was really passionate about giving back, and I was involved in a bunch of different projects. And then I started learning about this concept of a social enterprise, which really is that you can make an impact, have a mission, be really meaningful, and also actually build a business and grow and have the financial means to continue that impact. And so I wanted to learn more about that. And I decided to do it through school. And on like some of the first days there, I met one of my co founders who came with the idea of what's called Atlas Go Now. And it was at first his idea was a application where you would be able to do activity, so movement. I also was like a half marathoner, and running was a big part of my life back then. So that really clicked with me. But basically, using movement, and companies would sponsor you to donate to your favorite cause. And so there was like a few things going on in that world back then, but not that many. Another friend of ours who also was in the master's decided to join us. And so the three of us out of school were like, let's do this. And we were what, 23, 24, like crazy young. Um, and we didn't really know what we were doing. But we were super excited, like full of energy, what it's like at that age.
Yeah.
And we decided to go for it. We didn't really have like roles or anything specific, but just naturally, I ended up leading sales and revenue, as well as company culture. And like when people ask me, like, "Oh, you've been a coach for a few years," honestly, as soon as I started a company, I became a coach
Yeah.
because, yeah, that's the thing that I really cared about, pouring into our people, really making sure that they had what they needed in order to be able to succeed. And that came with just having a lot of conversations and really just listening to them. But yeah, so the company we grew from more of a B2C model to B2B model. And the idea was that we became an employee engagement app. So before COVID, we would help companies help their employees move through. We
Yeah.
first was running, but then it was yoga, meditation, all these different types of like including mindfulness. And then the company would have some sort of CSR component to be donating back to different causes. That's like the snapshot. It was beautiful. And I totally burnt out because I didn't have the tools to take care of myself. All I knew about working hard was that it was supposed to be hard. It was supposed to be a sacrifice. If you were stressed, it's because you were going the right direction. And it's because that's what I had seen growing up, right? The whole
Yeah.
like no sleep, and then also being in Silicon Valley in a culture that's like super broy and very much like the no sleep is the way to get there. And honestly, I think the startup model, there's a truth to that. And that if you like, because we try to really incorporate a company culture and all of these things, but honestly, like when you're at the beginning, getting investments, needing to have insane returns, like you do need to kind of work through the pain and like it'd be really difficult. Um, so I took 2022, I always say was like my hardest yes and my hardest, or my easiest yes and my hardest no, in that I got married. And so that was the easiest yes. And the hardest no was leaving my company because, yeah, they don't teach you how to leave as a co founder, especially when you've done
Yeah.
something with two other people. But it was because I was a little bit, I wasn't listening to a lot of the signs that had been coming. And ultimately, it really led to a pretty bad burnout where I just needed to do something else.
That's incredible. Is the tech company still around? Are they still
Yeah, so now we've merged with a European company. So now it's
okay?
called TerraGo, out of Belgium, actually. And so still working with a lot of corporations and yeah.
I love that you brought up CSR. My master's is in business, but with a concentration in corporate social responsibility. So my ears
Awesome.
always perk up a little bit. What did burnout we hear? We hear burnout a lot, and I've talked about
Okay.
burnout a lot on the podcast, more than I expected. And I think as entrepreneurs, we also experience that
Mm-hmm.
same burnout. I was just telling someone today, for me, it comes in waves that I have to be really careful. And even with this podcast, like I told you before we went live, I have decided this podcast is for fun. It's for connection and community. And when it starts to feel like work, the podcast will no longer exist because this is something that's supposed to be heart led and not part of burnout. But what did that burnout look like for you coming out of your startup?
Yeah, for me, it came. I mean, I also need to add the context that it was during 2020 where we kind of blew up out of nowhere because companies were in a situation where they needed to help their employees connect with each other. And so, like, one day I woke up and I was like, this website is broken. Like, we have 300 requests. How am I supposed to have 300 sales calls this week? And if you think about it back then, I didn't have the foresight to be like, let's hire a team, let's train people because we had
Right.
no idea how long it was going to last. And so, as a very much like just thinking business person, I was like, I just need to get as much sales as I can. Like, I need to lock these clients in. And so, at the beginning, it was exciting and it was fun and it was like full of dopamine. And I was like running from one place to another. And I remember I would run to pee. Like I didn't have a single moment for myself. And the only moment I had was around like between 3 and 3:30. I don't know why, but I had this break. I would run to the bakery and get sugar and caffeine. And I would come back and like now looking back, I'm like, yeah, I was just running on so much dopamine that my body was like craving it and asking for it everywhere. But then what would happen is on the weekends, I would crash. Like I would have zero energy. I wouldn't be motivated. I would often cry. I think I went through a little bit of a depression in that I just wasn't excited about anything. And obviously, there was a COVID component to it. But I think for me, what was more difficult is that everybody was like, I have time to bake bread and do all these things. Like, what new projects are you doing? I'm like, I'm surviving. Like, I am
Oh,
just trying to get this thing running. So, burned out looked like not having any time for myself and not creating the boundaries that I needed because there's a reason I always say this, but there's a reason that I burnt out and that my co-founders didn't. And it's like there is a big part of responsibility, which is on me, of just putting everything else first, and the project first, and the people first, and the team, and all these things before really like even listening to myself. And the way that it was kind of like a wake up call is super random, but I actually got COVID in November 2020. And so back then it was super scary. Like there was no solutions. We didn't know what was going on. And I remember at night, I got really, really sick. And I was telling my now husband, I looked at him and I was like, I'm not bloated. And it was the randomest thing, but I was like, I basically couldn't eat anything because I was so tired. And I realized that my body had been giving me so many different types of symptoms, and my gut health was basically just really not doing well. And so that was the first wake up call. And, I went to try to get like to doctors, all this stuff. Everybody was like, you did all the tests, like you're good, like you're in all the markers. But that feeling, and this is often where my clients come to me, they're like, everybody's telling me I'm fine, but I just know that I'm not. Like, I just had zero energy. I wasn't excited to do anything. And the other really big symptom was anxiety. And it was just debilitating anxiety in a way that I've never had in my life before, and thankfully no longer have. But I remember, and I was telling this to my husband the other day, I was like, do you remember when I would be in like my anxiety episodes? And he was like, I don't think I really realized what was going on inside. And it was, I mean, for anybody who's had it, they understand like just thoughts going and going and going, and my heart rate, and
Yeah.
just not being able to get out of it. And so yeah, that's what it looked like, really. No energy, anxiety, and then also like not wanting to be excited, or not being excited about the things that normally made me excited about. I wasn't working out much anymore. I wasn't really running. Yeah, just like overall feeling really low.
Yeah. Burnout is such a hard, anxiety is such a hard thing to explain to people who have never
Yeah.
experienced it. I had my own bout of anxiety in 2018 when I split with my ex, which is when I started my business,
Mhm.
ironically, all at the same time. And, you hear about people having anxiety, and then when you first experience it, it's like the entire world is shaking around you, like, and you
Yeah.
just can't grasp anything.
Mhm.
So, how did you turn your burnout into your business?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I need to use that tagline.
I was like, oh, I like how this sounds. Yeah, feel free to use
No
it.
wonder you do what you do. um, I so at first it was something really small that we did, but we left California. My husband's family lives in Florida, and we were like, we need to be with family. And so we ended up going there, which for me, the 3 hour time difference, because I worked so much with Europe, was insane. Like I could start my days at
Yeah.
9 a.m. and not 6 a.m. And just that, I was like, I feel like I'm on vacation. So that tells you the extent of like how much I was working. It was like 13, 15-hour days every day. And part of it was that. Part of it was getting therapy, working with an amazing therapist. The other was working with a functional medicine doctor and a traditional medicine doctor to help me understand, like, hey, actually, like the way that the things that you're eating and the exercise that you're doing, because when I did want to do exercise, I would like run a lot or like do a hit or something really intense.
Yeah.
But actually, what my body needed at that time was just, and being a yoga teacher, I still like couldn't, you know, tap into
Connect the
that.
dots for yourself. Yep.
Exactly. But what I needed was to really slow down. And so I changed my routine, and that I would go on walks instead of runs, and I would do yoga, and I started doing strength training. Um, I started eating animal protein again. I was vegetarian for 6 years, which I really didn't do for myself. And I think actually going back to like what is burnout, I think living in burnout is living without listening to your intuition. And when like, because the whole time that I was in burnout and I wasn't eating protein, when I actually like I was craving it, I would really want it. But because of the environment and everything that I was reading, and also what was going on in the yoga world at that time, like I was following trends and things that just weren't actually aligned to who I am. And so
Um,
it was a little bit of everything. So, like, starting to work a little less, hire more people. Um, And then being really honest with myself in therapy. And that led me to being like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, as much as I love this company, I love the people, I'm really proud of what we've built. It's just no longer for me. And I had a lot of anxiety in that decision making. And one thing that was so beautiful is that when I was in like clarity and just anytime I felt peaceful, I heard like this little voice being like, it's okay. Like, it's not for you anymore. And that's okay. And that's when I really knew that in the moments of clarity and peace, it was like, okay, this is really my intuition. This isn't the anxiety. This isn't the fear.
Yeah.
And so, with the help of, yeah, my husband, my family, and my therapist, I was like, okay, I'm making this big decision. My co founders were super supportive. The team was super supportive. Like, um, yeah, it was in the end something that I really need to do. And then the thing is, at the same time as I was building this company, I had done my yoga teacher training like on the weekends for 4 months. I had done my holistic health coaching and my Reiki certification. So
That's a lot.
my, it's a lot, but my intuition had been like pulling at me. And so when I left, I had all these tools that I was like, I know this is what I want to do. And so little by little, I had built a business before, so that wasn't scary to me. It was more like, okay, now I'm doing it on my own. And actually, I love that part because I was like, I don't have to run it by anybody. And
Right.
I'm still a big believer in like, you go further when you're together. And I just needed to be like going with the flow and not worry about like how much money I'm bringing in so that I can pay everybody else that's working for me, but just like do it on my own terms. And that's been really fun and amazing.
That's beautiful. I was also a vegetarian for a huge chunk of my life. I think it ended up being about 10 years. And I originally went vegetarian because I grew up in Texas and I did a project about factory farms, and that was enough for me to
Yeah,
stop eating meat for a long time. But I'm from Maine, and there were so many amazing resources for locally sourced, ethically
that's
sourced
awesome.
meat. And it's interesting that you like, I found my body felt so much better when I was
Oh, yeah.
consuming animal protein. And I like the point you brought up, especially in the yoga community. Even now, sometimes it can be a little intimidating to be a meat eater in the yoga
Mhm.
world. And I know I saw one of your posts that was about like the diet, like what we think we're supposed to do for food even. And there's a lot of pressure, especially for to be a vegan. And there's nothing, there's if being vegan works for you and your body and your lifestyle, beautiful, absolutely. But I discovered, and it's actually been, I think I started eating meat again when I was 26, so about 8 years ago. The first meat I ate is I cooked Thanksgiving turkey for my ex and his whole
Oh,
family, which was terrifying,
oh,
but I love to cook. So,
that's
but I'm still not a huge meat eater, but my body feels better when I'm getting animal based protein. And there is a little bit of shaming sometimes if you lean into the yoga world, into the wellness world around that. So I
mhm.
think it's really powerful that you help people lean into like, what does your body actually need? Um, Meg, who was on the show the very beginning when the podcast came live, she's a nutritionist, and we talked about that a lot. And I text her all the time because, like, right now, there's a lot of pressure for supplements, for
Mhm.
cortisol levels. And that's all over my TikTok and all over my Instagram. It's like you have cortisol face or what, I don't even know. I'm like, what in the hell does that even mean? And so I'll always
Mhm.
text her. I'll be like, is this some like I'm starting to feel that like I need this, even though I know I don't need this. And I just do like a mental check. And she's like, well, do you have any of these symptoms? No. And she's like, okay, then stop watching it. But we just get inundated with
Yeah.
supplements and supplements, and most of us actually have no idea what they are. But so your business is about 2 years old now. Um,
Yeah.
but like you said, you've been a coach, you've been doing these things for a very long time. What did your business look like when you launched it 2 years ago, and how has that changed in the last 2 years?
Oh my gosh, so much. So what, and I'll definitely come back to this nutrition piece because it's so important and a huge part of my journey. The business at the beginning really looked like having one-on-one clients. And the reason also is I've always loved sharing my story and just like being super authentic on Instagram. And people who like I went to college with or like friends of friends would write me and be like, hey, like, I see you're doing this big transition. I want to do the same. Can we talk? And then it's kind of before I even announced that I was doing a new business, like clients started coming. And I was like, okay, this is a thing. Like, let me test it out. And for anybody, and like, obviously, you know this, but for anybody who wants to start something new, it's just like, just try a bunch of things out. And
Oh,
so at the beginning, it was just virtual online coaching, and it felt a little bit more like life coaching, and some like there was always a holistic component, but it was a little bit more leaned into that. And then I had a few women come to me and be like, I want to start a business. How do I start that? So then I was like, oh, well, I can give you tips, and like, here's how to build a financial model and all this stuff. And they'd be like, oh, that was like a lot easier than I thought. I didn't think it could be this like explained in this way. And then I started when because we got married in 2022 and we decided to, for 4 months, travel Europe. My husband is Ecuadorian, and I really wanted him to, yeah, experience more of like where I'm from, my culture. And we were also like, when else are we going to ever have this time in our lives? He also quit the tech world to start his own business. So it was like just this beautiful moment for us. Once we came back, because we decided Northern California was still the best for us, we decided, or when we were back here, then I was like, okay, what is it that I really want to do? And so I started having Reiki clients as well. I love the in person aspect. I started doing events and day retreats because as a yoga teacher, like that's also something that I really love doing. I started a podcast called Unlock Your Vitality with Magali on a Journey. And so I was trying a ton of things. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm doing way too much. I need to actually figure out and like hone in and understand what it is. And I think what was really good for me is that I didn't find my niche too early. I didn't like focus too early. I worked with a ton of different types of people, at first men and women, and then I was like starting to really understand, okay, this is just what resonates best with people and also what gives me energy. And so that's when I knew it was the right thing to do. So I have a lot of online courses, so you can people can just join the course. I have an online community that we do biweekly calls on, so like you can also just connect with people in that way. And then I also offer one-on-one coaching, but then I also have the in-person aspect, which is day retreats in Northern California and events in San Francisco, but I don't do a lot of them. And I always partner with amazing other entrepreneurs and women as a part of it. And then I have my Reiki clients, but I only go see them once a week. So I rent out a little studio in the city, but only on Tuesday evenings. And then I also record the podcast. But as you were saying, I also wanted it to be for fun. And so now I've moved to 2 episodes a month instead of 4 because it just feels like that aligns a lot more. But I would say really the clients that I work with are women who are just like dying to have more energy, to feel better in their life, to transition. Like they know they're born for more, but they don't really know where to go. Um, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now.
love it. That's beautiful. Um, I liked what you said about not finding your niche too early, too. My
Mm-hmm.
business has changed drastically. So next month will be 6 years, but for the first
Wow.
3, I was a virtual assistant because I didn't
Mm-hmm.
really know what else I wanted to do, but I also knew that a virtual assistant wasn't what I really was either. But I
Right.
rebranded, I think it was either 21 or 22, I rebranded as a creative strategist. And I have really found that's the strategy realm. I still love doing the social media work, newsletters, websites, all of that, but it's the strategy piece before it where my passion is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, now when I take meetings with clients, they energize me instead of depleting me, which is
Oh
basically
yeah.
a lot of what you were, working with people that like that help you want to continue to level up, but also like you're so excited about what you're doing that it's not exhausting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are your retreats, your 1 day events? What does that kind of stuff look like?
Yeah. So the retreats are one of them is retreat to reconnect. The other one is retreat to revitalize. So they're 1 day events in Sebastopol, California, where it's a mind, body, and soul approach as well. I love food and I love cooking. And so everything there is made by me from scratch. And it's like made with a lot of intention to teach you about gut health and blood sugar balance and all the things. And we do some sort of movement, whether it's yoga or somatic dance or some sort of movement. We also do a lot of meditation, and then there's always a creativity piece. So whether it's making flower crowns or doing a vision board. And then one of them we had a friend of mine who has like a secondhand shop business. And so then there was like a shopping afternoon at the end of it with mocktails. But yeah, the idea is to really help you reconnect with yourself and just come out of it also with community. You get to meet new people. I think, you know, a lot of people who come are at least in their 30s or maybe late 20s and in a place where maybe they came for work or for a partner, but they don't necessarily have community. And that's when we think about a holistic approach, it's such a big part of our life. So I love that. And yeah, it's been really fun. And to also help people show that food doesn't have to be like, it can be really simple to be really nourishing. And also going back to what you said about really doing things that give you energy, when you're doing that, then naturally everything you do outside of your life is you're going to lean towards something that gives you more energy. And so more just by like living a more slow and aligned life, I go towards the foods that are healthier and that make me feel good, as opposed to when I think back and during my burnout, it was really like all I wanted was carbs and sugar and caffeine because I needed those things to keep me going.
That makes sense. We all have I still have those moments that all I want are carbs and caffeine for sure. Um,
And that's totally okay, right? I think one of the
mhm,
big things I'm so into lately is intuitive eating.
mm,
And I don't know if you've heard of Janine Roth.
I have
She
not.
has this amazing book called Woman, Food, and God. And I think the subtitle is like A Pathway to Almost Everything. And she really helps you understand your relationship with food. And
Cool.
I, having gone through like gut health and all the issues, I went through first the Western medicine and they were like, you fine. And then I went the functional medicine, but it was still outsourcing my health in the same way that the things you're experiencing on TikTok and supplements and all these things, it's like other people telling you what to take, right? And to a certain extent, sometimes it's important when we have imbalances and when we need help rebalancing those things. And also really helping people stay in tune with their intuition. And, you know, she talks about the fact that, like, if you let yourself have an ice cream sundae whenever you want it, you're not actually going to have it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because your body, if you really tune into what it is that you're having and what it is that you're craving, sometimes we realize that actually it's not that ice cream sundae, but it's a good cry or like needing somebody to hold us. And I think the world of intuitive eating is like untapped because I've felt like liberation and freedom and like this chatter that's used to always be there of like, what am I going to eat? And da, 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 like, well, I shouldn't eat this, or I need to work out if I eat that, or all these things. It's like no longer there because I'm not restricting myself anymore.
Yeah, and I think your point about like ice cream sundaes, that's what most people think about with intuitive eating. My friend Christina, who was on the podcast a couple weeks ago, she's very into intuitive eating. And initially people are like, well, you can just eat whatever you want when you want it, but exactly what you're saying, like when you stop, like what is your body actually, what is your mind? A lot of times, what is your mind actually saying you need, you know? Do you want those carbs or do you need a nap? Like sometimes it's, you know, is it another cup of coffee or is it taking some downtime? Because like for me, I know I have this huge slump around 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Like that
Mm-hmm.
is, I am not productive in that time. And when I was in my hustle era, it was very much, well, just, you know,
Get more
grab
coffee.
more caffeine. More coffee is mine, occasionally soda, but mostly coffee. And now I've learned like, let's not schedule meetings during that time in the afternoon when my body needs to rest. I'm a night owl through and through. Um, I'm more productive at like midnight than I am at 10 a.m. most of the time, but actually learning what you need in order to succeed. I want to back up before we wrap up. I want to back up to the feeling of letting go of the tech company this startup that you had put your heart and soul and mind and everything into, and the fact that you gave yourself permission to create space. That's
Mhm.
something I've been leaning into a lot this year is what can I let go of and what is that going to create space? Did you feel like you had any idea? I know you had the Reiki certification, you had all of these abilities, one to create income, but also to start working with people. But did you have a next chapter in mind, or what was the process like of letting go of this huge part of your life?
Like, I can't describe to you how difficult it was, honestly. It was so difficult, and it was like months of doubt and
Mm.
questioning and going back and forth, and every day being like, okay, I'm gonna tell them today, and then the next day being like, no, I'm not. And even when I made the decision, it was October 2021. I didn't actually leave until June 2022. So it was really, really difficult. I think I thought less about what was next and more about how can I make sure I leave in a way that feels good to me and the team. And the other thing that I was losing, so I'm a French citizen, is I was losing my visa because I was on this special visa for when you've built a company. And so I knew that eventually I was going to get married and that I was going to have a green card through my husband. But I also was like, there was a period of time where I might actually not be allowed to work. So, like, what am
Yeah.
I going to do doing that? It was really, really scary. And I think ultimately I just needed to trust that whatever was going to happen after was going to be okay. It was a lot of planning also, like from a financial perspective. And that's one of the reasons why it took time. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I struggle in social media with overnight successes because they just don't exist. Like, things really do take time, and that's okay. That's a part of the process. So I think it was, I needed to be okay with letting go. And what I really needed to be okay with was me following my intuition is going to open the doors to whatever is next. And I need to be okay with potentially this project breaking down if I go.
Yeah.
Not because I was a critical pillar or anything, but because it had been working a certain way for 6 years. And so when you take something away, like obviously there's going to be change and all these things. And I think that was the harder piece that I needed to let go of before even thinking about what was next. And then honestly, obviously it hasn't been easy every day because it's not easy to be a solopreneur and to do, motivate yourself and get things moving and all those things. And it's just been so much less stressful and it's felt so much calmer compared to what I was living in that it's just, yeah, it felt like an easier process. It's also way easier to think about having money just for me as opposed to a company that, we had raised $4.5 million from investors. Like, there was a lot of work to be able to give that back. So I think, yeah, I needed to be okay with letting it go and then trust that it was going to be okay. And little by little, like, I'm such a big believer in when you let go. And there's another book that's insanely, like, that was such a big part of my life, but it's called Letting Go, by David Hawkins. A Pathway to Surrender, I think, is the subtitle. And really, when you accept that, then things come your way. And I didn't expect them to, but from an abundance perspective, things ended up happening that also allowed me to be able to have more time, to make Unlock Your Vitality a reality.
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, just over that. So the beginning of 2023, I was in this huge transition period. I kept pulling the Eight of Cups tarot card over and over, and I was like, I need to walk away from things. I was in a 4-year relationship that really I knew was not going anywhere. We weren't unhappy, but it was never going anywhere. And I remember looking at Pikes Peak, which I went through an excruciating breakup and I ended up in Colorado. And Pikes Peak has been like this beckoning universal symbol
Mm.
for me. And I was driving down the highway to teach yoga one night in early January, and I looked at Pikes Peak and I got this overwhelming message. that I didn't move here for less. I moved here for more.
Mm,
And that was the start of like,
beautiful.
yeah, and I can see Pikes Peak if I walk outside, but like that was the start of the shedding and the unraveling of this world I had created. And it was terrifying. I broke up with the boyfriend of 4 years. In that time, I had reconnected with my now husband. We started officially dating that February. Had our wedding last October. Um, I have my daughter now. But also I quit my W-2 job this year and same thing. For years I said I was gonna be done. And I have a lot of financial trauma, so that's part of it too. But that piece that you've hit on that I don't think a lot of people talk about is the guilt of wondering what's going to happen when you're gone. And especially for you, where
Mhm.
you were one of the literally the pillars that started this company. But like for me with my W-2 job, there was so much that I took care of that, yeah, there's a little bit, and when I see things changing because there's no one to do it the way that I did it, there's a little bit of a guilt factor there. But
Yeah.
also, you have to find this deep rooted acceptance that, I mean, your startup didn't exist before you, but this acceptance of its potential to keep going with or without you.
Yeah.
And just what are you creating space for? I mean, this year, so since 2023, I left that relationship. I quit my W-2 job. I left one of the yoga, well, I'm almost done at one of the yoga studios I've been teaching at. I have 2 more weeks there. And I left a networking group that I had helped found. Um,
Wow.
and I have room in my schedule to breathe now. Like,
Mhm.
I don't take meetings on Mondays and Fridays, and I have room to just work at my own pace. I can take the afternoon nap if I need to. Like, I can take care of my body. I can get outside. I can go to Pilates. So
Mhm.
for those of you listening, like, what can you remove from your world that creates space? Because you have no idea the potential of that space until you create it. And that sounds like it's exactly what you've done.
Yeah, and with that space comes the ability to listen to yourself, like to cut out the noise and to actually hear what was happening. And I love that you brought the nature component because I would go, we lived in a place that had hiking trails right next to where we lived, and I would go on these hiking trails every single day and ask, like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And often I would just cry on the walk down these trails, and it was just so powerful to like I felt held by nature. I just yeah, space is so powerful.
Well, this has been beautiful. It's been so cool hearing about you and your journey, and I'm excited to stay connected and however I can support you in your business. But how can people find you? What's the best way to tune in, or if they're interested in coaching or your community or any of the things, where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been such a beautiful conversation. The best way to find me is probably on Instagram at Magali on a journey. I also have all the information on my website, magalionajourney.com. And yeah, you can always reach out. I'm super happy to just connect and share and see if there's something that we can help each other with.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Magali. And for everyone listening, if you're interested in finding out more about what I do as a creative strategist, or if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can find me on Instagram at Life Jen's Way, or you can email me at jen@jensway.com. There's 2 N's on Jen always. And thank you again. It's been such a pleasure. And for everyone listening, I will talk to you next week on Your Next Business Bestie. Thanks so much.